Hello, and welcome to episode 18 of 50 Women Over 50, a podcast for women whose personal confidence is born of experience. I'm your host, Sherrilynne Starkie. My idea for this podcast is to interview 50 women from all walks of life who are over 50 years of age about what they've learned by this decade so that we can all learn from them too. Today, I'm welcoming to the show author and executive coach Julie Ellis, whose first book, Big Gorgeous Goals, was published last year and will become available as an audiobook later this month. Julie is a serial entrepreneur and an angel investor who has taken several startup companies past Series A funding into high-performing enterprises. She's learned a lot about business and life along the way, and she's put all that wisdom into her first book for women entrepreneurs who want to achieve great things. So why don't we start with telling me a little bit about what you did to celebrate your 50th birthday?
Sure. I was worried that I wasn't going to get to do much, to be honest, as we were in the pandemic, and we had planned a trip. And we, being me and some very close friends of mine, had planned to go on a trip, and we wanted to go to Europe and ride our bicycles among the tulip fields in the Netherlands.
Oh, nice.
And so it wasn't exactly at my birthday. It was about 6 weeks after. And at the time, the Netherlands was basically in a lockdown and we weren't really sure we'd be able to go. And so it took until about 2.5 months before, when everything looked like it was going to come good, and we raced and booked everything. And I got to spend a weekend in Paris, a weekend in Amsterdam, and the week in between riding my bike in Holland looking at tulips.
That's a wonderful way to... Why did you pick that as your destination?
I've been to the Netherlands a bunch of times. I used to have a friend who lives there and I visited a lot. So I like the country and I like cycling. My friends really like cycling, and going to do the tulip fields is something that is a bit of a bucket list item. Like just the beauty of it is really, it's farmers' fields and you're just riding around looking at all these different colors of tulips. It's really quite spectacular.
So I've been there several times myself, but I've never been to the tulip fields. I spent a lot of time in Antwerp, but also I've been to Amsterdam and some of the cities whose names escape me at this very moment, but I know that they have big football clubs in them. But yeah, it is a beautiful part of the world. And you were really lucky that you got a chance to go, especially with the lockdown. Because things were kind of up and down at that time, right? It's like, this week you can go. No, you can't. Yes, you can. So as you were coming up to your 50th birthday, like, how did you feel? Were you happy about it? Or did you feel
There's something nerve-wracking about getting older. I think you become more aware of not knowing how much time you have left. And I think as you get older, you see people that you went to elementary school with or high school with or university with who are dying, and you start to, it's possible to go down the road of feeling afraid, I think.
Sure.
And so I very deliberately am trying to put myself in the mindset, getting what I really want out of life. And what is that? And how am I going to do it? Because every day above ground is a good day. Mm-hmm. And so let's figure out how to not wait to do things and not wait to, later. It's easy to put things off. And so really trying not to do that.
So what are some examples of things that you decided, that's it, now's the moment, now or never?
The big trip for the birthday was a big piece of that. Yeah. And doing something like that where I had a small number of really close friends around me, as opposed to doing something big, like having a party or something along those lines. And that really felt like what I wanted. I enjoyed quality time with some people who are very special to me. And that, I think, is something, doing things of quality rather than quantity is something I'm aware of, and making that effort, putting things on the calendar and doing them.
Yeah. And spending time.
Yes.
People that you want to build your relationship with, or that you have an established relationship with, that it's really investing in your relationships more than your experiences and stuff.
Yes. And not getting consumed by being too busy for things, but really figuring out what the priorities are and making time for them.
So, well, let's drill down on that a little bit, because that's pretty easy to say, much, much harder to do. So tell me a little bit about, like, how were you able, because I know as a successful author and business person, you're very, very busy. How are you able? Please tell me. I need to know. How are you able to, like, manage the busyness and so that you can actually focus on these things that you want to prioritize?
Probably on a quarterly basis, I sit down, and when I'm doing a planning around goals and those kinds of things, I also take the time to really look at my calendar and look at how I'm planning for things and how I'm doing things. And inevitably for me, I always say Friday's a day that I do writing, creative work on bigger project type items. So when I sit down at the end of a quarter and start looking at things and I see clients coming in on Fridays, I know that I'm not honoring my own boundaries, right? So I have to then go back and sort of recalibrate. So is Friday the right day? So questions I would ask myself, is Friday the right day for that kind of creative and project work? Or is it a day better spent seeing clients? If it is, what day is a better day for project work and deep work? And how do I want to structure my schedule and my life so that I do the things I think are important? And I do need a quarterly revisit on that, because it's hard to have the discipline, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm. That is what I'm hearing, some discipline and some real intentionality about, I'm taking responsibility for this and I'm going to make sure that what I want is what is going to happen, not what everybody else wants.
Yes. Yes. And if I don't honor my own boundaries, then there will be none, and I will feel exhausted and unsatisfied.
So is that a new thing for you in your 50s, or is that something you've practiced before then?
I've practiced it before now, but I'm finding a commitment to it in booking it into my calendar, a time to do the review and make the changes on a regular basis before I get to, it's January, before I get to December and feel unhappy about how the year unfolded.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson that really as I was coming up to 50, at the end of the year, you're like, wow, I didn't get the time off I'd hoped for. I didn't get the learning I'd hoped for. I didn't have the time with friends I'd hoped for. And there's no one to really look at for those things except me.
Mm. So this is a theme that I'm seeing is coming out in these calls that I'm doing for this podcast, is that the women I've interviewed, they're almost uniformly committed to making time for me. It's like, I raised my kids, I did my career thing, I've moved house a dozen times or whatever it is. And right now it's me time. And I guess I'll have to wait till I do a podcast called 60 Women Over 60 to find out, is me time a finite thing that we only have in our 50s, or does it extend past 59? I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's a really interesting question. I suspect that with time, you get even clearer on what you want. That's what I'm seeing for me, and what I see in some of my friends who are ahead of me.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Here's my fear. And this is just based on my own hunch and what I'm seeing around me, is that when you get a little bit older, like into your 60s and early 70s, and people seem to be really even more so doubling down on the relationships piece of it, right? I want to spend time with people I care about in relationships that are important to me. Yet the power in those relationships shifts to the other people, the younger people, because they have the busy, busy lives, right?
Yeah.
They have the busy, busy lives, and they're running around like blue ass fly trying to get things done. And it's our job at that point really just to be patient and be there when when everything comes together and you do get to have these things. But I think you're right about being intentional and forcing the issue and making sure that the family vacation or whatever it is you're planning on comes together. So I think that's a good lesson. Did your life beyond the pandemic and everything, but just life itself, has it changed significantly for you in your 50s?
I feel more committed to some things, definitely. Like, there's always interesting when you change decade. I think there is an intersection of opportunity to look at what you want out of that next 10 years or what you want to leave behind. And so thinking about things like being more committed to exercise and looking after myself and setting myself up for the 60s, the 70s and beyond, hopefully, has definitely been something that has come into my mind. I've always been I like to cook. I like to cook things homemade, but really just examining, what are the things I eat? How do I get out into the world and exercise? All of those pieces.
But coming up to the end of January, did you try the dry January thing this year?
I didn't try that. No.
Okay.
No, but I'm working on doing more exercise. So I've learned about myself that if I try too many things, I'll fail at all of them.
Yeah.
So I try to choose really one thing and put some focus there. And if I can make that one stick, then I can start to layer.
Yes, that's a good idea. The layering of things. I agree with you. Well, I did the dry January. I've done it every year now for, it's at least 10 years, but it might be 12 because I know that I was still doing it when I lived in the UK and I moved back in 2011. Yeah. So it's like probably 12, 14 years I've been doing the January thing. And I just find that it just gets the year off to a good start. You clear your head from all the holiday shenanigans and get focused on what you're going to do for the year. But I like this idea of layering on your good health from January into forward things. Because one thing I didn't do this year that I have done in the past is that I didn't really beat myself up about food. Where in the past, I did dry January and go strict keto, just trying to strip off all the holiday weight. But this year I just thought life's short. I don't want to be miserable all January. So I had a few treats and some ice cream like that.
There you go. One thing I can say is I used to do things very sort of hardcore when I would go to do something like you're talking about, like dry January and strict keto. And throw something else in there, you or me. And I now really try to be a little bit gentler with myself because what I would rather do is create a sustainable long-term habit. So that's really where I'm trying to focus now, is on taking on things that I can stick with. Not if I don't like them, try something, figure out what I like and stick with it. And then change it as needed, but not just cycle through, constantly changing.
Yes.
Or taking on so much and going so hardcore that you become exhausted and you don't do anything.
That's the other risk.
Yeah.
And then you have the added shame of failing at something that you started. So,
yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Looking back, what were you doing when you were in your 30s?
I was working at a corporate job before we started the business and not enjoying it.
What advice would you give to yourself, to that young woman, knowing what you know today?
That you don't have to stay in a job you don't like forever. Other opportunities will come. That you don't have to do everything the hard way. Spend a lot of time, a lot of years, a lot of decades really doing things the hard way and letting go and attaching that how hard I worked to my worth, my own self-worth, and that I've let go of a lot of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'd like to drill down on that a little bit because I think that is something that is remarkable about Gen Xers. Because we really have always got our self-worth out of who worked the hardest, right?
Yeah.
What
we could produce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm Like I'm learning now through these interviews that like most of us are looking back and saying, God, that was a slog. Why did I do
Right?
that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I look at my kids. I have two kids in their 20s and one in their teens, late teens, and they're not doing that. That's
No,
not the life they want for themselves.
I know. Well, I observed this with my own children. Like the lesson that I was trying to teach them, that I was emulating, was that you can do anything you want in this world. All you have to do is work hard enough at it and you're going to achieve. That was the lesson I was laying down. The lesson they were picking up was, I want a job that I don't have to work as hard as mom.
Yeah. They were sort of saying, God, that looks awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And it's fascinating how that works.
Yeah.
And I often wonder if it was difficult for seeing their parents work hard as women. Our moms, some of them worked, some of them didn't. Like we were a real generation where that change happened.
Yes.
Where many more of us worked. And, I remember I have a story that my husband was driving my son to sports on a Sunday morning, and they got to the end of the street and they were waiting to turn. And of course, there was very little traffic out at the main road, and they make the turn. And my son says, why is there not any traffic today? My husband said, well, because, people aren't going to work. And he said, what do you mean people aren't going to work? And my husband said, well, most people just work like when you're in school on the weekdays. And he was so dumbfounded by that because he had never seen either of his parents, like two entrepreneurs who worked all kinds of rhythms and hours and did what they had to do. And he could not understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. And how old was he then?
About 7 or 8.
Really? Out of the mouth of babes, eh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember when my children, they were kind of they were older than that. They were in their teens, and then we were starting to have conversations about what are you going to do? And they both articulated, yeah, no, I want a job that when I go to work, I work. And then when I leave, work is over. And so one went into teaching and one went into nursing, and then they both learned that doesn't actually exist because they both have things that they're doing, and especially since pandemic, everybody works at home now.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And so do you cover these kinds of concepts in your new book?
I talk a lot about if you want to achieve big things, when we see people who do great things, big, amazing things, we're seeing that highlight reel. We're seeing that all the good things, the outcome, the great, look what happened. But we're not seeing the sort of like, it's like an iceberg. 10% of it sits above the water. 90% of it sits below the water. And that's where all the hard work comes. And that's where the processes and the systems and the people that help us get to where we are, that's where they all sit. And so you need to think about all of those things as you consider chasing big goals.
And so who did you write your book for?
I wrote it for women leaders.
Okay.
Although I've had many men who read the book and email me and say, this was a great book. It's not just for women, but it was really pointed, I think, as women, we wear a lot of different hats. We wear a lot of responsibilities in our caregiver roles. Yes. And whether you have kids or not, you end up in those caregiver roles.
Is this your first book?
Yes.
So what made you decide I have to write this book?
Well, after we sold the business and I ended up out in the world, I entered a very difficult period of grieving what had disappeared, which was that I wasn't at the business anymore. And even it wasn't only that, it was also that even if I was at the business, what I wanted wasn't there anymore. And so I was going through a period of grief, and I did not know how to talk about that without looking ungrateful for achieving an entrepreneur's dream, which is selling your business.
Yes.
And so it turned into like a period of like a very low period. I was really unsure of how to get out of it. And that intersection of grief and gratitude got me stuck for a while. And so I was delivering a workshop as a growth mentor for a women's accelerator program. So there were a group of women entrepreneurs. And I actually started telling that story, and I had been so deathly afraid because I didn't know how to talk about it. And the feedback I got from the story was amazing.
Yeah.
People wanted more. They wanted to know more. They wanted to hear more. And so it eventually that sort of turned it into a keynote where I started speaking about it, which led then to the book because there was still more to say.
Interesting. So
yes, I backed into the book.
But you know what? I was going to say, I've had the opportunities to interview a number of authors, not just on this podcast, but I have other podcasts that I produce on behalf of clients. And this is often the way with a book. It's the tip of the iceberg thing again. Yes, I have a book, but what you don't realize until you've created one is that it's actually 20 years in the making, right?
Yes, it is. It is definitely. Definitely. Yeah. You just realize there's more people come and they want to hear more. And then you sort of work your way through to where there's a book.
And how long has your book been out for?
It came out in June. And this year I have the audiobook coming out.
Oh, when is that coming out?
It's coming out on February 27th.
Oh, perfect. Will it be available on Audible?
Yes, it will. And it's there for pre-order now, I believe.
Okay, good to know. And did you read it yourself?
I did.
How did that experience?
People have very strong opinions about these things, don't they? And I personally, I realize it's not possible for every author to read their book. I have learned that from people who weren't able to because publishers make decisions, those kinds of things. But I really enjoy books that are read by the author. I feel like it gives a more personal connection.
Yes.
And so I wanted to read the book and I recorded it last summer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Thank you.
And how are sales going for the traditional book?
They're going well. They're going well. I mean, it is for sale at Indigo and on Amazon and then Barnes and Noble in the US as well and Amazon. So it's been a real learning curve, learning about this whole new arena that I have entered into, which has been really exciting and fun.
How fun? In what way?
I've met some really great people in this process to becoming a published author. People I would probably not have met otherwise who are regular parts of my life, and just learning about a new industry and getting the curtain pulled back a little bit on how people actually get books published and what happens. And all of that has been really fascinating.
And so are you working on your next volume then?
Not yet. I think I have a lot more to do with this one before I go to the next. But I'm really curious to know, what do people want more of? What wasn't in this book? What are the big questions? And that may inspire me to go on to the next volume.
So you don't see yourself in retirement? You haven't given any thoughts to that or slowing down?
No, not right now. Not right now. Yeah, I've got a few more good years. We'll see as my 50s progress. But I've always thought I would work into my 60s. I do think it's fascinating. I know a lot of women in my life right now who are working past 65 and are really engaged in what they're doing, and they love it. And so they're continuing to work. And I don't know what life will bring for me, whether I will want to do that or not. I think it will depend on what the work is.
Yeah.
And whether it's a day or two a week or whether it's 5 days a week, and how that all will shape.
But I can tell you, of the 18 women, including yourself, that I've interviewed so far, with the exception of one, no one has plans to retire. Some are saying slow down. Some are saying work's going to look different. Like, I'm going to work from Portugal and stuff like that. Work's going to look different. But only one of the interviewees was like, yes, on this date, it's over. I'm done.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That again, I think it's a Gen X thing. I just think that we're different. We are a unique generation in our approach to work. It's been our lifeblood our whole lives. And I don't know about you, but I'm reticent to give it up. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like the autonomy it gives me, and I like the creative challenges of it. I love the relationships that I get through it. The social part of it is very, very important to me. I just can't imagine what life looks like if I'm not doing something like this every day.
Yeah, without it. I know that one thing I definitely have been working on and have done with the business now that as I'm growing this, I'm building the flexibility to work from anywhere.
Yeah.
And it is important to me.
And you're in Canada, right?
I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to get out of the snow? Just like
Yeah, exactly. I'm sitting here looking out my window at a snowstorm. So yes.
So am I. Yeah, we all want to get out of the snow for sure. And I think like our mothers' generations, they did the snowbird thing, right?
Yeah.
They would just like flock to the south for several months and then flock back. But I think our generation's got a different slant on it thanks to internet technology and stuff. Like we're not going to go and bake ourselves lying next to a pool. We're going to go and sit on a balcony somewhere and look at the ocean and work from there. So looking into your crystal ball, what are you most hopeful about for the future?
I am most hopeful about the work I'm doing, getting out into the world and seeing it evolve as I gain feedback from people.
Give me an example of that.
Well, I think the work in the book are my ideas. I interviewed 16 other women for the book. And so their stories are woven in with mine. But I'm really curious about talking to a lot more women and getting this work out to a lot of people and really learning, is this my generational viewpoint? Is this something that is more universal for all women? Does it transcend countries and all kinds of other things? And so I think it's just putting the work out there and continuing to have conversations.
I think going audio is going to give you a lot of data. That is another thing that I've learned through these interviews is that I'd say probably half the women I've interviewed only do audiobooks. They don't do like traditional hard copy books anymore. They find it too difficult. They got to wear bifocals.
Yeah.
Well,
so that's interesting.
You will get a whole new audience of people that, it'll be good for you.
Yes, I think so. And personally, my personal preference for any business book is an audiobook. With any like fiction reading, I do prefer to hold the paper.
Right.
Hold it in my hands.
Yeah. I can only read on vacation. I'm a podcaster. I'm all audio, but I only do the hard copy stuff. I need to be lying in a hammock.
Right. That sounds pretty good. It's a pretty good way to read a book.
I agree. So shifting gears now into the quick round, what are you reading? What are you watching? What are you binging on these days?
I'm watching Only Murders in the Building. I'm loving it.
I've heard good things.
Oh, so good. We're just into season 2. And I hear they're filming season 3, so that's very exciting. But yes, really enjoying it. What am I reading? I have a book up next to my audiobooks called Breath by James Nestor. And I'm super excited to listen to that because I think we clench up and don't breathe and do all the things we should. So I've heard really good things about it. So.
Okay. I'll check that out and I'll put some links to it in the show notes. Are you doing any good works in the community or supporting charity or doing any?
I am working with the founder of a small charity right now, Resilient Kids Canada. And she's got a great nursing background, long time in healthcare. And this project is something that came and how we build resilient kids and how we teach them good skills. I mean, kids today are faced with lots of different anxieties and things that, our pressures were different when we were kids. And so she's doing great work and I've been doing a little work with her.
I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
And is there an app you couldn't live without?
Oh, an app I couldn't live without. I'm probably not very exciting on that front. Social media. I like surfing around on social media.
And do you have a life hack that you'd like to share with our audience on life in your 50s?
I think it's about really being intentional about living.
Yeah.
taking every day and enjoying it. And, tonight I'm going to walk across my snowy street and have a glass of wine with a neighbor. And on the weekend, going to have dinner with some friends and just really being intentional about making time for those things in my life.
Good for you. Where can people find your book?
And they can find the links to buy it through my website at biggorgeousgoals.com.
Okay. Excellent. Is there anything I haven't asked you that we talked about?
My gosh, I don't think so. I think it's been such a great conversation today. I'm so interested to see all of the 50 women that you interview and to listen to all of the episodes, because I think it's such an interesting, people say 50 is the new 40. And I don't know if that's really true or if that's us Gen Xers trying to make ourselves feel better. But I do think it's a really interesting place to be in life with everything that we've learned that got us to here, and what's ahead.
Thank you. I agree with you. This has been 50 Women Over 50, a podcast for women whose personal confidence is born of experience. I want to thank my guest, successful entrepreneur and author Julie Ellis, for joining me today. She's someone who reached the top of her career and achieved her dream of flipping her business, and yet she was surprised when she felt sad and a sense of loss when it was all gone. What an incredible lesson to learn, and how incredible that she shared it with us all. She makes a lot of sense when she talks about learning to be kinder and gentler with ourselves as being the key to both business success as well as overall happiness. See the show notes to find out more about Julie and about her book, Big Gorgeous Goals, and where you can connect with her online. I've included links to her website and her socials, along with links to some of the other items and resources we discussed on today's show. And join me again for next week's show, when my guest will be someone who is a kindred spirit for me. Agnes Knowles is a Canadian who took up podcasting in her retirement. Her show, The Boomer Woman's Podcast, explores a vast array of issues that are important to the baby boomer lifestyle. That's next week. But in the meantime, please drop me a rating or a review on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's connect and create a whole sense of community of wise women over 50 by sharing a link to the show with your friends and your connections. See you next time on 50 Women Over 50. I'm your host, Sherrilynne Starkie.